A customer once came into my shop angry, confused, and holding a stack of gas receipts like evidence. He said nothing feels wrong, and that he is filling up constantly. No warning lights, no rough idle, no loss of power you could feel. And that is exactly what made it dangerous. One tiny sensor was quietly deciding how much fuel his engine burned every second without him ever knowing. By the end of this, you will know exactly which one it is. The shop was barely awake. Air compressors were still warming up, the concrete floor cold enough to sting through boots. The sedan idled smoothly in the bay, steady and calm, like it had nothing to hide. That is always the first red flag. Engines that are truly healthy do not feel perfect when something is wrong. They feel honest. This one felt rehearsed. The driver stood nearby, arms folded, watching every move I made. He told me the story I hear constantly. Same commute, same driving habits, same gas station. But where a tank used to last a week, now it barely survived 3 days. He had already checked tire pressure, replaced the air filter, even switched fuel brands. Nothing changed. He said it drives fine, almost defending the car. No hesitation, no shaking, no check engine light. That sentence is the trap. Modern engines are incredible liars, not because they are poorly built, but because they are designed to protect themselves at all costs. If something starts going wrong, the engine adapts. It compensates. It hides the symptoms so the driver does not feel a thing. And while you keep driving, thinking everything is normal, the engine quietly burns extra fuel every second you are on the road. I started the car again and listened. The idle was smooth, almost unnaturally smooth, too controlled. It sounded like the engine control unit was working overtime, adjusting and correcting dozens of times per second to maintain the illusion of perfection. I leaned near the tailpipe and caught it, a faint richness in the exhaust. Not smoke, not fumes, just the subtle smell of fuel that did not need to be there. Most people never notice that smell. Mechanics learn it the way bakers learn dough. I plugged in the scan tool, not expecting any fault codes. I was not looking for errors. I was looking for behavior. The screen lit up with live data, and within seconds, the story began to tell itself. Fuel trims were elevated, not wildly, not enough to trigger a warning, just high enough to tell me the engine had been compensating for a long time. That is when I asked the driver a question that always gets the same reaction. Has anyone ever explained how your car decides how much fuel to use? He shook his head. Here is the truth most drivers are never told. Your engine does not decide how much fuel it burns. A single sensor does, and everything else, injectors, ignition timing, throttle behavior, follows that sensor's lead. Modern engines do not guess. They measure, they calculate, they obey. Every second you drive, your engine control unit listens to one sensor more than almost any other. It uses that signal to decide whether to add fuel, pull fuel, advance timing, or hold back power. If that sensor tells the truth, your car runs clean, efficient, and balanced. If it lies, even slightly, your fuel economy collapses while the engine feels completely normal. That is what makes this sensor so dangerous. It does not fail loudly. It does not break suddenly. It drifts. Inside the exhaust stream, just inches from extreme heat and pressure, sits a small probe no bigger than your finger. It is exposed to soot, moisture, vibration, and temperature swings every time you drive. It is engineered to last, but not forever. Over time, it slows down. Its readings lag behind reality. And when that happens, the engine control unit starts making decisions based on bad information. The engine control unit does not question the sensor. It trusts it. So when the sensor begins to report that the engine is running lean, even when it is not, the engine control unit responds the only way it knows how. It adds fuel. A little at first, then more. Enough to keep combustion smooth, enough to hide any misfires, enough to make the engine feel strong and quiet. But every one of those corrections costs you money. Your miles per gallon drop. Your exhaust runs hotter. Carbon starts building where it should not. Oil dilution increases as unburned fuel sneaks past piston rings. And the driver keeps driving, completely unaware, because the car never complains. That is why this problem shows up as gas receipts instead of warning lights. The driver stared at the scanner as I explained it and asked, "So you are saying the car thinks it is starving even though it is not?" Exactly. Imagine a bathroom scale that always tells you you are underweight. You would keep eating. That is what the engine control unit does. It believes the sensor even when the sensor is wrong. And the scariest part, this sensor can be off enough to cost you 20, 30, even 40% of your fuel economy without ever triggering a fault code. The car will happily burn extra fuel for months or years if it thinks that is what is required to stay safe. That is why so many drivers assume their car is just getting older. It is not aging. It is being misinformed. The data on the screen confirmed it. Long-term fuel trims were creeping upward, slow and steady, like a confession written over time. The engine had been compensating for bad data for months. Now, the mystery had a cause, a face, a reason. But knowing the problem is only the beginning. Because next, you need to understand exactly how this sensor works, why it fails the way it does, and how to prove without guessing that it's the reason your fuel economy is disappearing. That's where things get really interesting. The reason this one sensor is so dangerous is not because it fails dramatically. It fails politely, quietly, slowly enough that the engine learns to live with the mistake, and the driver pays for it without ever realizing what is happening. Most people believe fuel economy is mechanical. They think miles per gallon drops because an engine is getting old, because traffic is worse, or because fuel quality changed. But modern engines do not think like humans. They do not feel age. They do not guess. They obey data. And that data comes from a small group of sensors feeding information into the ECU every single second. Among them, this one sensor has more influence over fuel consumption than almost any other component on the car. Here is why. Your engine does not decide how much fuel to burn. The ECU does. It does that by constantly adjusting the air-to-fuel ratio, aiming for a narrow target where combustion is clean, powerful, and efficient. To hit that target, the ECU needs feedback. It needs to know whether the last combustion cycle was rich or lean, too much fuel or too much air. That feedback comes from a single probe sitting in the exhaust stream, inches away from extreme heat, moisture, soot, and vibration. Every time your engine fires, this sensor measures oxygen content in the exhaust and reports back to the ECU. Rich mixture, lean mixture, perfect. The ECU listens and adjusts fuel delivery instantly. This happens dozens of times per second. It is a constant conversation, a loop, a balance. When the sensor is healthy, the system is beautiful. Fuel trims stay near zero. Power feels crisp. Miles per gallon stay where they should. The driver never thinks about it. But sensors do not fail like light bulbs. They do not just stop working one day. They drift. Over time, this sensor becomes slow. Its internal chemistry degrades. It gets coated in carbon and residue. It still sends signals, but those signals arrive late, delayed, slightly wrong. And that is all it takes. When the ECU receives delayed information, it interprets it as a lean condition. It thinks the engine is not getting enough fuel, so it compensates. it adds more. Not enough to cause misfires, not enough to trigger a warning light, just enough to keep everything smooth. That is the trap. The engine still feels normal, acceleration feels fine, idle is stable, no codes, no lights, but fuel trims begin creeping upward. The ECU is constantly correcting for a problem that does not actually exist, and every correction costs fuel. This is why drivers say the same thing over and over. Nothing feels wrong. Of course it does not. The computer is hiding the problem by overfeeding the engine. But look deeper, and the signs are there. Exhaust smells slightly rich, tailpipes darken with soot. Catalytic converters run hotter than they should. Spark plugs foul faster. Oil begins to smell like fuel because excess gasoline washes past the rings. Miles per gallon drops first. Everything else follows later. The scariest part is that the ECU trusts this sensor completely. It has no way of knowing the sensor is lying unless the readings go completely out of range. As long as the sensor seems plausible, the ECU obeys it. That means a sensor can be wrong enough to cost you 20 to 40% in fuel economy and still never set a fault code. This is why scan tools matter. Not to read codes, but to read behavior. A mechanic does not just look for warning lights, they look at fuel trims. Short-term trims bouncing aggressively, long-term trims slowly climbing. That pattern tells a story. It says the engine control unit, the ECU, has been compensating for a long time. It says fuel is being added that is not needed. It says the system is being lied to. Drivers replace air filters, spark plugs, fuel injectors, even mass airflow sensors. Sometimes they replace the catalytic converter. Thousands of dollars spent chasing symptoms while the real cause sits untouched, quietly controlling everything. I have seen engines with perfect compression and spotless internals burning gallons of extra fuel every month because of one sensor drifting out of spec. I have seen cars lose 30% in miles per gallon while driving perfectly smooth. I have seen people blame bad gas for years. It was never the gas. It was the feedback loop. Once that loop is compromised, the engine does not fail loudly. It bleeds quietly. But here is the turning point, because this sensor is not mysterious once you know how to look at it. You do not need to guess. You do not need advanced tools. You just need to know what the numbers should look like and what behavior gives it away. That is where everything changes. Once you learn how to test this sensor properly, you stop guessing. You stop throwing parts at the car. You stop burning fuel blindly. And next, you will learn how to expose the lie, confirm the sensor is the problem, and fix it before it drains another dollar from your tank. By the time most drivers realize something is wrong, they are already months, sometimes years, into wasting fuel. That is the cruel trick this sensor plays. It does not fail loudly. It does not break suddenly. It fades quietly, slowly. And while it does, the engine control unit, the ECU, keeps trusting it like gospel. This is the moment where everything clicks. Your engine is not dumb. It does not guess. It reacts. Every time you press the gas, cruise on the highway, or idle at a stoplight, the ECU is listening to one sensor more than almost any other. It uses that signal to decide whether to add fuel, pull fuel, adjust timing, or protect the engine by running rich. When that signal becomes slow, lazy, or slightly inaccurate, the ECU does not argue. It compensates. That compensation is what kills your miles per gallon. I have seen engines with perfect compression, spotless internals, fresh plugs, new coils, and clean injectors still burning 25% more fuel than they should. The owners insist they maintain everything. They are right, everything except the one sensor that quietly decides how much fuel gets burned every second you are driving. Here is what makes it dangerous. This sensor almost never fails all at once. It does not just stop working. Instead, it gets sluggish. Heat cycles weaken it. Carbon coats it. Moisture contaminates it. Short trips poison it. Over time, its response slows just enough to lie. On a scan tool, a healthy sensor switches rapidly, rich, lean, multiple times per second. It looks alive. A failing one looks tired. The signal lags. It sticks. It hesitates. Sometimes it stays rich longer than it should. Sometimes it barely moves at all. To the ECU, that hesitation looks like a lean condition. When the ECU thinks the engine is lean, it does exactly one thing. It adds fuel. More fuel at idle. More fuel cruising. More fuel accelerating. Even more fuel on cold starts. And because the ECU is good at hiding problems, the engine still feels smooth. No misfires, no stumbles, no warning lights, just a fuel gauge that drops faster than it used to. That is why drivers always say the same sentence, "It runs fine." Of course it does. That is the trap. Inside the exhaust, temperatures climb. Rich mixtures burn hotter. Catalytic converters overheat trying to clean up excess fuel. Carbon builds on valves and pistons. Oil gets diluted with unburned gasoline. The engine isn't just wasting fuel, it is aging faster than it should. Mile by mile, damage stacks quietly in the background. And the check engine light stays off. The sensor hasn't failed enough. Slight inaccuracies do not trigger codes. The ECU just adapts. It keeps driving, it keeps compensating, it keeps burning your money. With the engine fully warm, a simple scan tool tells the truth. You watch the fuel trims. Short-term trims are bouncing wildly. Long-term trims are creeping upward, sometimes into the double digits. That's the confession. That's the ECU admitting it has been lied to for a long time. Then you watch the sensor itself. The live graph doesn't lie. A healthy sensor dances, a bad one drags its feet. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And here's the empowering part. Testing this does not require a mechanic's license. It requires curiosity, a $40 scan tool, and knowing what to look for. Once confirmed, the fix is almost disappointingly simple. Sometimes cleaning helps, especially if the problem is contamination rather than age. Gentle cleaning around the threads, making sure the connector is tight and corrosion-free, can restore proper switching in mild cases. But if the car has over 100,000 miles, replacement is usually the smart move. And this is where many people make the second mistake, buying the cheapest sensor they can find. Cheap sensors respond slower. They fail earlier. They lie again. That's why experienced mechanics stick to original equipment manufacturer parts, Denso, Bosch, or NTK. These sensors switch fast, survive heat, and tell the engine control unit the truth. Replacing it takes about 15 minutes. Let the exhaust cool. Use the proper socket. Don't rush it. Thread it in clean. Torque it correctly. Start the engine. The change is immediate. The idle settles. The exhaust smell disappears. Fuel trims drift back towards zero. For the first time in months, sometimes years, the engine control unit stops fighting false data. It breathes correctly again, and the real improvement shows up over the next few drives. Miles per gallon climbs. Throttle response sharpens. The engine feels lighter, happier, more willing. Not because you added power, but because you stopped wasting it. To lock the fix in, you drive smart for a few days. Gentle cruising, no aggressive throttle. Let the engine control unit relearn clean data. Teach it the truth again. And prevention? It's simple. Fix vacuum leaks quickly. Keep the air filter clean. Clean the mass airflow sensor occasionally. Use decent fuel. Do not ignore misfires. Protect the wiring. These habits keep that sensor honest. Most drivers never learn this. They just accept rising fuel costs as normal. They assume their car is getting old. It isn't. One sensor was lying. Now you know how to catch it, how to fix it, and how to stop it from stealing another dollar from your tank. And if this opened your eyes, stay with me, because the next video exposes another hidden system that quietly destroys fuel economy long before any warning light ever turns on.